Welcome in to your Belmont Stakes preview brought to you by NYRA Bets. I'm Anita Marks from ESPN, and joining me tonight is Dan Todjman. You can see him all over ABR, America's Best Racing, the best place you can go to get your horse racing information. There's no denying that. I'm in New York / Hoboken. I call it the sixth borough. But Dan, you are in the thick of it. You were at the track today. You're in Saratoga. You're living large. Let us live vicariously through you. What's the vibe right now? A very special weekend in Saratoga, considering that it's the first time that they are hosting the Belmont Stakes.
Yeah, it's super exciting. I posted earlier on Twitter X that the atmosphere in Saratoga is absolutely electric. We were on the backstretch this morning. We got to see some of the contenders, including the favorite in the race, Sierra Leone. We got to see the Preakness winner, Seize the Gray. We got to see the Derby winner, Mystic Dan. All these horses look amazing. There are a couple of new horses in the mix, and you take it all, you put them in the gate at Saratoga. Belmont Stakes at Saratoga. It's just a really cool feeling. And there's like 15 stakes races this weekend at Saratoga too. So just loaded cards. If you love betting, if you love action, it's hard to beat this. It kind of feels like a little mini Breeders' Cup weekend. And on top of it, it culminates with the Belmont Stakes, the third leg of the Triple Crown. So we're super excited. Just ready to get going, ready to look at this field with you.
Well, I've got my Belmont Stakes cup in honor of the Belmont Stakes. I'm sure that listen, they are getting a facelift, okay, and it's going to be fantastic once it's completed. By the way, this is water, just so folks know. I don't drink and host, but
That's good of you. I wish I could say the same for myself.
I'm sure they're going to be very envious of all the festivities and the fun that's going to be had at Saratoga this weekend. We've got a great show lined up for you in just a few seconds or minutes, really. Kenny Mayne, one of my former coworkers at ESPN, is going to join us on the program. We'll talk horse racing. He's in Saratoga as well. Maybe we'll get a pick later on tonight. You got NBA championship, the Dallas Mavericks going up against the Boston Celtics. Maybe he has a pick, maybe not. We will find out. And then a little bit later, Sarah Badwe. I know I'm sorry. I know I'm going to botch her name, and I truly apologize. But I'm really excited to get her on, handicapper analyst for NYRA Bets, and we're going to break down every single one of these horses that are going to be racing in the Belmont Stakes on Saturday and get you locked and loaded for that race. But before we bring in Kenny, a few things. Number one, let's talk about three of the top storylines heading into Saturday. One is obviously a different track, right? Everybody looks at the Belmont Stakes and they know it's the longest, right? 12 furlongs. But since this is being ran at Saratoga, it is not 12 furlongs. It's 10 furlongs, the same distance as the Kentucky Derby. So Dan, how does that affect how people are going to be handicapping this race?
So it's interesting. In some ways, it's an easier puzzle this year because we're getting to see some of these horses for the second time at 1.25 miles in the past 5 weeks. And you just don't get that, right? I mean, especially with 3-year-old horses, you might see them once at 1.25 miles. And if they're really good, you might see them down the road in a big race later in the year at this same distance. But the Belmont's sort of been this unique thing at 1.5 miles. You kind of had to guess a little bit as to which horse might be able to make that distance. But other people who are really good at sort of the pedigree analysis might see this as a lost opportunity because these 1.5 mile races, the Belmont Stakes traditional distance, they're also easier in a sense to handicap because you could sort of eliminate the horses that based on pedigree alone don't seem like they fit that distance. And we've had winners, these sort of common sires, stallions, who have produced Belmont Stakes winners in recent years, including, the Curlins and the Tappets of the world. And so those bloodlines have traditionally been very good and kind of made it a little easier maybe to say, hey, you know what? I like this horse as a Belmont Stakes horse. This year, you're kind of making your decisions more on, previous races and less in that pedigree work, I think. I mean, it still comes into play somewhat, but I think it's an interesting puzzle. It's a different puzzle. But with horses like Mystic Dan, who we saw at 1.25 miles at Sierra Leone, we've seen go this distance. You can say, hey, I've got a pretty good sense for whether or not they can make this distance. And then you start digging into some of the other variables, including, how the pace might unfold in this race, what's the track condition, so forth and so on.
Another big storyline is, of course, the rain. Rain today. You got rained on at the track today. 50% expected tomorrow on Friday. 50% expected on Saturday as well. If that's the case, this will be all 3 legs of the Triple Crown will be ran on a sloppy track. And we know how that benefited Mystic Dan in the Kentucky Derby, right?
Yeah, so I mean, Mystic Dan is a clear cut, a horse who obviously loves the weather, sees the gray. He doesn't mind a wet track, and so we know based on the fact that the Derby and Preakness winners both ran well over off tracks, that would bode well for them if the rain does continue to come down. I was just telling you, I was just driving through a rainstorm, and so the track just got a good soaking after the races today. And more rain in the forecast the next couple of days. And you got to just look through those past performances to see which other horses are likely to run well over a wet track. There are a few, and there are a few that you might say, hey, you know what? Maybe this horse won't run as well over a wet track. Dornock is one. He's one over a wet track. He's one to consider and look at. He's one that I like. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And there are a few others who, like Sierra Leone as well, obviously ran a good Kentucky Derby. And then prior to that, has 2 really big races over muddy and sloppy tracks. So, the track will again be a factor.
And last but not least, very interesting that neither the Kentucky Derby winner, Mystic Dan, or the Preakness winner, Sees the Gray, are favored in this race. That's something we do not see often either, right? So it's just it really plays to the parity in regard to all the horses that are going to be, as I like to call it, active and attractive come Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, no, it's 100% right. A couple of the, obviously Sierra Leone, as we mentioned, is the favorite, didn't win the Derby, came close, has been considered for a little while now to probably be the best horse in this crop. So it's logical that he would be the favorite. That being said, I could see, the people connected with Mystic Dan at 5-1 or Sees the Gray at 8-1 feeling a little disrespected. I did speak to one of the My Racehorse owners, which is the ownership team, 2,700 plus owners behind Sees the Gray. And they actually like the fact that they're being disrespected at 8-1. They're like, no one thought we were going to win the Preakness. And so good, we'll take it. No one thinks we're going to win the Belmont. Great. We're fine with that.
Yeah, we like to call that bulletin board material in sports for sure. Before we bring in Kenny Mayne, I know, again, it's our Belmont Stakes preview show brought to you by NYRA Bets. They've got a special offer for folks. Why don't you share that with everybody, Dan?
Yeah, so NYRA Bets, you go to NYRABets.com and use promo code ABR25. That ABR25 promo code will give you $25 in free bets and a deposit match, a deposit match up to $200. So deposit up to $200, you'll get $200 back. And that promo code ABR25 gets you that $25 free play. Of course, we'd also take, if we win, all of this other stuff won't matter. And hopefully throughout the show, we'll put you on some winners so you could properly use the promo there from NYRA Bets.
All right, without further ado, let's bring in the star of the show, and that is Kenny Mayne, joining us here on our preview. And look at the background. We can see you're already enjoying the beautiful city of Saratoga, Kenny. So welcome in. Share with us, how did you get into horse racing?
I'm not quite there yet. This is actually Connecticut. We're driving up tomorrow.
Oh, I thought you were here already. I'm sorry.
We're going for fun. My wife and a couple daughters, and just like enjoying it. I've been to Saratoga a million times. I used to cover horse racing for ESPN and went there just as a fan before that. I grew up south of Seattle, and we had a track called Long Acres. And my uncle and my dad, I'd say principally, were the ones that had me into it. It was like 15 minutes from our house. It's where Gary Stevens really made his name. He started at Le Bois, came over to Long Acres, and then he got too good for that and went down to California. But had the Bays family was prominent there. Now they have Emerald Downs because Boeing bought the Long Acres and wiped it out. That's a long story. So like we lose stuff all the time. We lost the Sonics too, trying to get an NBA team back. But yeah, it's just been in my blood. Then I went to school at UNLV, so we would, before football practice, run off to the book place and get one in before practice. And then ultimately, it benefited me because I ended up in that same career. So deep background all my life, really a horse race fan.
I love it. So a family affair coming to Saratoga this weekend. It's going to be a very special weekend, no doubt. With that being said, Obviously, you follow the Kentucky Derby, you follow the Preakness. Again, a lot of horses that showed what they could do in those races are going to be trying to win this race as well. Give me some of the horses that have stood out to you so far this season.
I mean, the two winners for openers and the one that missed by this much, Sierra Leone, who I hate doing this because usually I'll chase, I'm not betting 2-to-1 horse. I'm going to find some value here, but I think the odds are going to rise up. I could be wrong. I think it's such a quality field that it's going to spread out a little bit. The money's going to spread out. You got a wild card in there with Mind Frame, 2 for 2, winning really impressively. You got the Derby winner. You got Dwayne with the Preakness winner. You got others who people thought were going to be pretty good, and for one reason or the other didn't fire when we last saw them. But I just think Sierra Leone's the best horse in the race, and I think some of these horses are going to go wild on the front end, set it up perfect. Only 10 horses in the race, not going to have the traffic problems that he had in the Derby. Just shift on over near the rail and find the best path and make his one big run. So I just think Sierra Leone has proven its consistency. It's 3 for 5. The 2 races it's lost has been by like 4 or 5 inches total. So it could easily be 5 for 5 coming in. And that's not to knock the others at all. I think we have a quality field.
And you mentioned some of the issues that Sierra Leone has had. He's been a little sort of green, a little erratic in the lane at times. So for me, I'm like, you know what? That's a question mark. Am I going to take a short price on a horse that comes in with question marks? I know that they're experimenting with different bits, which is the piece that that's in the horse's mouth as they're running. So they're experimenting with a new bit. It's like, it's like kind of like betting on a basketball game and just kind of saying, man, I want to bet. Let's say, I'm here I am, like sort of tormented Knicks fan, right? Like if I know the Knicks have been choking year after year or game after game in a certain situation, I'm like, there are a lot of question marks around this team. Plus, they've got injuries. Now, this horse is a different story. There's only that one question mark, but it's enough to where I wouldn't want to take a short price. Like, does that scare you? And then do you then think about, well, how am I going to protect myself in case this horse goes wacky at the end of the race again?
Probably the all button. I mean, the hope of hopes is to be alive on a pick 4, pick 5, pick 3, whatever, and spread out for sure. Because I don't think it's just an overwhelming favorite. I've seen the prep races, I've seen the Triple Crown races. Right now, I still think he's the one. And even though he has been pretty weird in the stretch, his mistakes have only cost him 2 races by that much, right? So it's not like he faltered and fell way back. Hopefully they've straightened it out in the 3 or 5 weeks really for him, and figured out the right way to get him on a straight course.
So I'm curious. When I go to the track, I try to find not the wise guys per se, but like guys that are walking around with a program. They're like face planted in the program, right? They've done all their homework the night before, Kenny, right? So they're coming in. They walk into the track at like 11 o'clock in the morning. They already know. They're not. I'm someone who I'm like, okay, well, I really like the name of this horse. I go down to the paddock. Wow, that horse looks really good. A lot of muscles on that horse. I think I'm gonna put some money. Like, what are you like? Do you do all? Are you gonna be doing all your prep before you walk into the track on Saturday?
I'm hoping we have a really early Friday night dinner so I can put some more, because I really haven't put time into the rest of the card at all. This race is really the only one I've looked at hard. But no, when I used to cover racing with Randy Moss and Jerry Bailey and all the gang, unless you could get the PA or somebody to go run a bet between races, I usually bet way ahead. At 11 o'clock, noon or whatever, me and Hank Goldberg are, betting the whole card, and then you have your tickets in your pocket. But I like to look at it all and pick some horizontals, some 4s and pick 5s. But then you go back race by race and you change your mind. In fact, it's funny, in the Derby, I changed my mind late. I moved to Sierra Leone. And now I'm totally forgetting. It was the 4 horse in the Derby.
Catching Freedom.
Yeah. That was where I was to begin with. And over the course of the day, I just looked at it. And I was like, I think this is the one. So that happens during the course of the day. And admittedly, it also happens how you're doing during the day. Sometimes then you're trying to get back. You might, take longer shots. But I'm sticking with that one now. The one that, like I said earlier, I think Mind Frame is a real question. I have no idea what that horse is going to be. I mean, it breaks its maiden with over 100 buyer, runs right back, winning by 7. But I think that's one of the ones that's going to create this faster than they want pace.
Yeah, definitely an X factor. We'll dive some more into mind frame in a little bit. I'm interested in hearing Sarah's thoughts on mind frame. But I sort of, in terms of sentimental favorite, the horse is a Maryland bred. I got my start in racing, at the tracks in Maryland. So like I like the story. And to Kenny's point, I think at the very least you're looking at another pace factor, another horse that's going to prompt and press. And the faster they go, I would think that potentially helps obviously Sierra Leone, which is I think that's the scenario that Kenny would like to see unfold.
Yeah, and additionally, because it's not 20, it's only 10. That's not that's a medium size. A small field, not a huge field. It's somewhere in the between. There shouldn't be really an excuse, for getting blocked. I mean, if you watch the Derby, I watched it like 20 times over and over. Also, with regard to what might or might not have been called by the racing officials, and it was fascinating to see the path. And it not only rail slipping out, but then I think had to steer one more time before he really got his legs under him. Then he starts gearing to the left, and all that happened during the stretch. So I don't think it's going to be a mess like that this time.
So I host Sports Talk Radio on ESPN New York every Saturday afternoon and Sunday morning. And the gentleman who was hosting before me, literally right before he ended his show and I was about to come on, said, "Oh, I just got a text message from a guy who's really into horse racing who told me Mystic Dan's going to win because the track is so muddy. So I'll go throw some money on Mystic Dan." And I was just like, his name is Gordon Damer. And I was just like, "Okay, Gordon, bye. Like, time for me to start my show." Sure enough, Mystic Dan wins. He gave out the winner 5 minutes before I started my show on that Saturday. But nonetheless, Kenny, before we let you go, take us to the window. Exactly how are you going to be playing the Belmont Stakes?
Well, for sure, I'm betting, depending on what I have left on me, I'm betting Sterling winning heavy place, because if I'm wrong, you want to get something back. I'll probably single it on some of the spread ones, but I think I'll also play other tickets where I add a few of the others we've mentioned in and hope I'm right. But if I'm wrong, you hope you catch one at 10-1 or something.
Kenny, I've heard you say a couple of times now, it depends on what you have on you. I'm going to make a pact with you right now. You probably don't know this. We're going to be sitting in the same area on Saturday. Let's make a pact. If you run out of money first, I'm there for you. If I run out of money, you'll be there for me.
Like
what do you say?
Well, something else I've done, and I had great success. There was one particular Breeders' Cup. I like to do show parlays. You start with whatever, whether it's $20 or $100, whatever your number is, and you just literally keep writing it up. And I can't remember which year. Was it Santa Anita? It might have been 2014-ish, and we couldn't miss. It was ridiculous. We had like 8 people, and we had to like declare a dividend halfway through because nobody wanted to risk that much. But it's fun when you're right. I mean, that's the great thing about it. Different than, say, showing up and playing blackjack or throwing dice. You get to decide, and people don't always get it if they haven't been involved. You're playing against your fans right around you. Track's going to take its cut, and they give back all the rest, and you get to look at this. I printed this out. Our printer actually worked.
I love it.
Hard.
Kenny, before we let you go, some NBA action tonight. Folks will be watching this broadcast, by the way, into Saturday, getting ready for the race. So 2-part question here. Number 1, Dallas Mavericks, Boston Celtics. Who do you like in the series first?
I'm going with Dallas, partly on the point that was made earlier, like a little bit of value right there. Like, Boston deserves to be the favorite. I'm not shocked at all if Boston wins the whole thing. Good for them. Big Mark Cuban fan for one, and the way Luka and Kyrie are playing together. They've figured it out right at the right time, to be as forceful as they are. I just think there's something scary about that team and very appealing. I don't know the number right now. It's over 2-1, right, for the whole series. And I think Boston's under 2. I don't know if I have the numbers exactly right. But
probably since we're talking about betting, my favorite bet in regard to the series is you can get the Dallas Mavericks plus 1.5 on the series at -110. I think this is going to go the distance. I've got Dallas winning in 7. So if I can get Dallas plus 1.5 in the series at -110, that's probably my favorite wager. What about the game tonight? Dallas is getting 6.5. They've won 7 of their last 9 road games throughout the playoffs. One of the hottest teams coming into the postseason. Do you like Dallas tonight? I might even throw some money on the money line with them.
I think Dallas wins outright game one. There's just something about, and that doesn't mean Boston's not going to win the whole thing, but Dallas has a good little thing going right now. So I like the attractiveness of either the 6.5 or just bet them to win.
Love it. Kenny, thank you so much for joining us. Always a pleasure seeing you. And for you and your family, enjoy Saratoga this weekend.
I'll see you in our area, and I hope I don't need your money.
Okay.
Same. We'll see you, Kenny.
Well.
Thank you.
You guys there.
Take care. Before we bring Sarah on again, this is your Belmont Stakes preview show brought to you by NYRA Bets, and they've got a real great special. As we bring Sarah on, we're really gonna do a deeper dive into these horses and getting you to the window. Let the folks know what that promo is, Dan.
Yeah, you just go to NYRABets.com. You use that promo code ABR25. You'll get $25 in bonus money, and you'll get a deposit match up to $200. So you deposit $200, you'll get $200 back. Really, really good stuff. Really excited about that. And I did want to share, just in terms of excitement, the excitement of this weekend in particular, we put together a little bit of a video previewing what's in store for Saturday.
Trying to hold on for the final 50 yards. It is Arcangelo to win the Test of the Champions.
I love it. That looks great. Even you can hear my dogs, but my dogs are uber impressed with your production value here, Dan. Everybody at ABR. All right, Sarah El Badwe is joining us now, analyst and handicapper for NYRA Bets. So, Sarah, so thrilled to have you on the show. Love some more female energy here, breaking it down with your wealth and your knowledge, getting everybody ready for the Belmont Stakes. Thank you so much for spending some time with us this evening. Really do appreciate it.
Of course. I appreciate you having me on. Sorry that I'm in limbo right now, but we are safely made it back to the Airbnb after a day at the track. So that is good news. I just have a dog that will have lots of opinions if I dare to go inside before I talk to both of you.
Well, I have 4. So, and they have many, many opinions. So, Dan and I were talking earlier today and he's just paid you so many compliments. You've hit some big long shots in your career. And so a really great reputation out there in this field of handicapping. How have you done it?
I don't want to say that I try to think outside the box or see what other people don't see, but I think that a lot of the times when you can find a horse that a lot of other people will gravitate to, and you can make a really strong case against why they may not be able to be as successful as others are seemingly believing, that's the time when you can find those prices. And especially in maiden races or lightly raced horses, sometimes the 2-year-olds, you can usually find a horse that maybe has a little bit of an experience, maybe it's lower profile connections, maybe just you're not getting the Irad Ortiz Juniors or the Todd Pletchers or the Chad Browns of the racing world in terms of connections. And that's when you have that opportunity to find somebody else and at a decent price.
Well, it's great because we're, what Dan and I want to do, we want to do a deep dive into all the horses that will be racing on Saturday. Before we do that, Dan, you've got a question?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, I think it's sort of similar to the question that you had asked earlier, Anita, as it relates to this field, how unique it is with the Derby and the Preakness winner, neither of them being favorite. Sarah, take me through your journey through this Triple Crown. Were you on these 2 horses in those races? If you were, are you still on one of them? Are you fading them? How do you, obviously each race is its own puzzle. How do you factor in what we've seen over the past 5 weeks, the tough races those horses have been through, those particular horses have been through, and the field that we've ended up with here on Saturday?
Yeah, I can't take any credit for winning Kentucky Derby or Preakness picks. Mystic Dan, I thought that it wasn't necessarily the mud that moved him up in his big win at Oaklawn. There was a strong rail bias that day. That was the better part of the racetrack to be on, smoother sailing. And that's where he got to be. And he had a really similar trip to that in the Kentucky Derby. And I think he was also benefited a little bit by two of his foes who was outside scraping paint and then battling down the lane. And he stayed just unbothered towards the inside with a great ride from Brian Hernandez Jr. And then Seize the Gray. He has improved dramatically. I had an inkling that he might try to be forwardly placed, but I didn't really think he was necessarily good enough to seal the deal in the Preakness. I thought that Mystic Dan made his run. He ran his race. He set a very similar trip as he did in the Kentucky Derby. It's just a shorter race and not as hot of a pace for him to end up closing into a little bit as that second flight, that stalking position. So obviously, you don't have a Triple Crown on the line. There is a little bit of that letdown, but it is good seeing them face off against each other yet again.
All right. Well, let's break it down. Let's start with Seize the Gray, the one horse, 8-1. As we know, won the Preakness Stakes, got that perfect ride, very similar to Mystic Dan. Curious to get your thoughts in regard to this distance, how it would benefit or maybe not, and the fact that this horse drew the rail. So Sarah, let's start with you. Your thoughts on Seize the Gray.
He's talented and he's clearly improved over his last couple of races. I think that it's not as much of a question of him getting the distance in this race. It's more a question of what sort of pace scenario he's going to have to handle, especially from that rail draw. I think that instructions for him are really simplified. He has to have some forward position. And while he has wins without necessarily being on the lead, he has to gain some sort of advantage early on to get himself into a position where he's not getting stuck in traffic, stuck behind horses, and ending up with a terrible trip in comparison to what he did in the Preakness. So I don't necessarily see things playing out for him tactically in this race, but I think to ignore the fact that he has gotten significantly better over his last couple of starts would be kind of silly. And I also am really curious to see what price he ultimately goes at, because his ownership connections, My Racehorse, they like to bet. And early pools were saying that he's going to take some significant money.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you on I think everything you said. Before the Preakness, I've said this a few times. I even posted it on Twitter X. I said I'm getting some serious Oxbow vibes out of this Preakness. I was like, I feel like Lucas is going to go to a lead with this horse, or with a horse, and wire this field. Unfortunately, the horse that I picked was Just Steel. I picked the wrong horse. I didn't listen to Lucas when he said that they were sending Seize the Gray, and I didn't think that he could, that he'd be able to get to the front and stay there. And I thought he'd face more pressure. So complete misread for me there. I think now it's quite clear what the strategy is. Although I have heard Lucas again say, well, we don't necessarily need the lead. I don't know. I think it's clear at this point. They're going to the lead with this horse. Then the question is, to the point that Sarah made, how much additional pace pressure does he face? We were going to talk about some of the other horses. Dornoch is one who's, I think, a logical pace presence. And then Mindframe, the horse on the outside. So I will say where I am at this moment on Seize the Gray is that I think that he's got a lot of ability. I think if he gets a similar, trip and ride to the one that he had in the Preakness, he's very dangerous. If he takes pressure, having now his third really, really tough race in 5 weeks, I do have some concerns. I think he might back out of it. And I do think the price will be shorter, as Sarah pointed out, because of the My Racehorse factor. So I don't know that we'll get 8-1 on him. I don't think he's going to be 3-1, but I think he might be somewhere closer to 4-1 is what I was thinking. Maybe 4-1, 9-2. Is that about what you're thinking, Sarah?
Yeah, and honestly, anything under 5, I'm just not really interested. It was such a last time was the time to have him at a big price with a great trip and a great ride. And things are likely to not play out in a similar fashion, and you're not going to get as much value on him going forwards into the Belmont.
The 2-horse Resilience opened up at 10-1, ran better than he looked in the Derby, starting out at the 18th post, had to really do a lot of work, still finished 6th, but running with blinkers for the 3rd time. And of course, it helped him win the Wood Memorial. So Sarah, your thoughts on the 2-horse?
He has some ability. I don't necessarily know what his preferred distance is going to be or what the goals are with him going forward the rest of his 3-year-old campaign and possibly as an older horse as well. But he's one that's shown a lot of progressive improvement for trainer Belmont. He's really stepped up as of late. And I think his trip, as you said, him having to go very wide, breaking from that wider outside post in the Derby, it's worth noting because Mystic Dan had a similar type of trip in terms of where he was positioned early on in the race. But Resilience was the one giving up significantly more ground and covering more square footage than Mystic Dan was. So with that being taken into consideration, I don't think that he ran all that badly in the Kentucky Derby. And he also comes in here fresh. He hasn't run in the Preakness. He hasn't run in between those races. So he's had a little bit more time to freshen up and recover coming in. And those horses that have those trips in the Kentucky Derby, I think that they're always worth at least a look, if not a bet back going forwards into the Belmont Stakes or wherever they may show up next, because you can easily excuse trips in the Kentucky Derby for many horses. It's a singular phenomenon. You don't have 20 horse fields trying a new distance for the first time in any other situation.
Yeah. I think, to Sarah's point, I think he did run a massive Derby, at least visually, again, with the ground loss considered. I think people are aware of that too, and I think he's gonna take some action. I think he might be shorter than 10-1, not much shorter, but he's gonna take action. I think he's gonna get support. For me, I have to at some point make a decision, kind of where I'm going to draw a line and where I'm going to start saying, look, this is one I'm not going to include, and this horse falls into that category. Simply because I think we've seen sort of the same race from him, at least from if you look at the Beyer speed figures, he's posted a 90-90 and an 89 in 3 consecutive races. He's been beaten by, Sierra Leone by a healthy margin. And again, that's now, 3 races back. But I think to my eyes, at least, I think he's still a cut below these. I think you've got Sierra Leone, who's, obviously probably the best horse in this race. And then you've got a couple of others in here, like Mindframe. We don't know what he's going to be. So we know there's a bit more of a ceiling. We don't know what he is yet. I think we sort of know what Resilience is. And for me, he's just a cut below.
Looking at the 3 horse, of course, Mystic Dan, as we know, won the Kentucky Derby, and many people, and Sarah, interested to get your thoughts. I've heard them say the best ride ever, maybe in the history of the Kentucky Derby. This distance obviously suits him, right? It's 10 furlongs. It's not 12 because it's being ran at Saratoga, but this will be his 3rd race in 5 weeks. So you've got to throw that into handicapping, I would imagine. What are your thoughts on the 3 horse, Sarah?
He's obviously got talent. He's a horse that I was wrong about for quite some time in the earlier part of his career. I thought that he was more of a sprinting type, but he was able to stretch out effectively and win at Oaklawn Park, even with a little bit of a rail advantage and that nice ride by Brian Hernandez Jr. to go and save all the ground in that spot, clearly showing that he could handle a wet track as well. But he really, I think, proved himself in the Derby for me because of how close he was to the pace in that race. And that really started to come apart in the later stages. Those horses that were going fast early on were getting tired and fading, and that opened the race up to allow some of those horses coming from further back to close in, like Sierra Leone, like Forever Young. But Mystic Dan was the one that was closest to that pace that came apart. And I always want to upgrade horses that have those kinds of trips. And then in the Preakness, I thought he ran his race. He ran fine. He just wasn't able to catch a horse that was loose on the lead, that clearly appreciated the wet track as well. So when looking at horses coming back on short rest, I take the same approach as I do for horses trying a surface that has a little bit of moisture in it or a wet track for the first time. I tend to be optimistic about their chances to do it until they prove to me that they can't.
Yeah, I thought Mystic Dan, needed absolutely everything that happened in the Kentucky Derby to happen for him to win that race. Brian Hernandez, obviously a pretty masterful ride, went at just the right time, sat the perfect trip before then, and then, had just enough thanks to, a little bit of jostling in behind him. It all kind of worked out perfectly. I think he's an honest horse. I think he's going to run a race. I think that the pace might be a little healthier than it might appear on paper. Certainly, I think it'll be more honest than it was I will say this, like, will it be like blazing fast? No, but I think the pace will be honest. I think he stands to sit another good trip from the 3 post. Brian Hernandez is just a good jockey. The horse is going to sit the trip. He's going to get the best race possible from Brian. I have him finishing third or fourth here, though. Again, I think it's just asking a lot for him to make a mile and a quarter again after running, these two massive races in the past 5 weeks.
The 4 horse, the Wine Steward, 15-1, New York bred horse. So we'll have a lot of fans rooting for him in the grandstands, no doubt. Finished second in the Lexington Stakes as well as the Peter Pan Stakes. But a horse that maybe better 8 furlongs, not 10, certainly not 12. Sarah, how are you handicapping the 4 horse?
I would have loved to see him cut back and run in the Woody Stevens because he's quick and he's talented, but the propensity to finish second at some of these longer distances is really adding up for him. And I think that he's also going to be up against it from a pace standpoint. He's a horse that likes to be forwardly placed. There are other horses that might be faster than him early. Then he's trying to do something new for the first time while trying to get this mile and a quarter distance. And I just don't really think that this is necessarily going to be what suits him best moving forward. But he is a pretty cool, consistent type of horse.
Yeah, I'm with Sarah. I think he needs to be going shorter, not longer. And I also think that he might again just be a cut below these. I don't think, I think he's a solid grade 3 horse, maybe a grade 2 horse if everything goes right in a race. I don't see him winning the Belmont Stakes.
The 5 horse Antiquarian, 12-1, won the Peter Pan Stakes, one of 3, count them 3 Todd Pletcher horses that will be racing on Saturday. And also likes running on a sloppy track. Sarah?
This horse is cool. I mean, he had such a trip down at the fairgrounds in that race where he finished behind Catching Freedom and was caught very wide that day and really rebounded well in the Peter Pan. But I think that you have to ask yourself what price you're willing to take on a horse that isn't necessarily one that's run one of those faster races as of yet. And when he has faced some of the competition similar to this level, he hasn't really been able to compete. Maybe he's improving. Maybe he's a horse that's just figuring things out now at this time. But I would be a little bit hesitant to take him at what I think is going to be a little bit too short of a price on a horse that we might hear from later on this year, but I don't want in this race.
So I'm a little more into Antiquarian myself. I like, by no means is he my top pick, but I think he could run a pretty nice race here. I just think he'll sit a nice trip. I'm envisioning, and we're going to get to Dornoch in a moment, I'm envisioning Dornoch either alone on the lead or basically, kind of going at it with Seize the Gray, 1-2. And I think Antiquarian is one who's probably going to be sitting, a couple of lengths off of them. And I think Johnny is going to have clear run late and is going to have one shot. I mean, we'll find out if this horse is good enough. I mean, to date, he's won the grade 3 Peter Pan. He had excuses in Louisiana Derby breaking through the gate before that race. So this horse could be anything. We haven't really seen him, fail in any significant way. I think there's still, the ceiling it's still unknown. So I think Antiquarian, to Sarah's point, I mean, if he's 6-1, I don't want him. But if he hovers around the morning line price, I'm definitely interested.
Dornoch, I know you've been itching to talk about him, Dan. This is the horse you want to, the 6 horse, 15-1, finished 10th at the Derby. Son of Good Magic, brother to Mage, of course, who won last year's Derby winner. Has the speed to press? You've been talking about the speed, and you think really is going to give Seize the Gray a good run for his money. Sarah, your thoughts on the 6 horse?
If you liked Dornoch in the Kentucky Derby, I feel like you have to bet him back in the Belmont because he was completely eliminated at the start of that race. He's a horse that likes to be on the lead. They tried having him sit off horses, raiding behind horses at Keeneland. He resented that clearly. They were planning on going from post position 1 in the Kentucky Derby, and he got stuck in a little bit of traffic after not braking all that well. So his day was over from there on out. Never really got the chance to prove what he could or couldn't do that day. I don't like him in this particular spot. I think that there's too much pace to really help him get the right kind of trip in here. But having a win or having a second place finish over the track already, as he did debut at Saratoga, obviously going a much shorter distance, I think is something worth considering. And he's going to be the right kind of price if you thought that okay, he just had no chance in the Derby. They rated him at Keeneland in the Bluegrass. He clearly didn't like that. There are some excuses that you can make for this horse. I just think overall things don't necessarily set up for him from a trip standpoint.
No, I'm making all those excuses. I'm making every single
you
one of
love
those.
him?
I mean, look, I'm not going to be betting like, I'm not betting thousands of dollars on him. I mean, I might be betting thousands of Kenny's money if he's willing to let me use it. So, but no, I do. Look, it's pretty simple. You really like, and I'm a big replay guy. I do watch a lot of replays, but this is one where you could just literally look at the past performances and it's clear as day, right? This horse has been on the lead, alone on the lead in 3 races, and he's won each of those 3 races. When he's been, when he's tried to rate, he's been a little off the pace, or he's had issues getting to the front because of just general trip trouble. He doesn't really pass horses, and so that's not a winning approach. And so I think at this point, I mean, he's got one of the best jockeys on the country in the country board, Luis Saez. I think he understands the mission. You go to the front with this horse. You're drawn 6. You're outside of Seize the Gray. You have the option to go. And Seize the Gray, I think, will probably yield. I mean, Jaime Torres, had clear instructions in the Preakness. He had a horse to his outside who kind of laid off of him there, and he was able to just go. This is going to be different. I think Dornoch goes. I think he clears to the lead. And I think he's pretty feisty once he gets to the front. He beat Sierra Leone in the Remsen when he was on the front end. He's so feisty that Sierra Leone passed him, and he was like, no, wait. I was just in the front. I need to get back to the front. And he actually came back on Sierra Leone. Dornoch is a real feisty, gritty horse. He's just a little confused with what they've been doing with him, I think, the past couple of races and why he hasn't been on the lead. I think he'll be on the lead, and I think he'll either stay there or get passed late by a very good Sierra Leone.
I think somebody has a horse crush. Let's talk about the 7-horse Protective. This is the second of the 3 Todd Pletcher horses that will be racing. Has never won a race, is 0-4, but has placed or show in all 4. This is a Mike Rapoli horse, vitamin water. Didn't get the job done with fierceness in the Preakness. So giving it a shot here with Protective. What do you know about Protective, Sarah?
I think it's worth noting that the main player that was going to be coming in for these connections, Fierceness, they're pointing to another race later on this year with him. They want to give him a little bit more time off to recover from the Kentucky Derby, where he went off as the favorite. He was a part of a quick pace, but he really backed up out of there significantly. And so maybe connections want a little bit of stake in this race, more so than they think that their horses necessarily are their best shots to win it. And I think that he is one of them that has some ability. He's been consistent, even though he hasn't won as of yet. But if he wins the Belmont for his first win ever, he's going to do it without my backing. But another quick note on Dornoch, I just want to say, when he won that Remsen, he rode a significantly strong rail bias that day to come back on Sierra Leone. Sierra Leone's one of only 2 horses that day, pretty much, that made up any ground whatsoever. So he has ability. I like that they're going to have to put him on the lead. You would think he needs to get back to those tactics if he's going to be successful, but that win might look a little bit better than it is.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and that is absolutely true. But I'm going to chalk it up to grit. So let me have that.
It still happened.
Yeah, Protective. Not for me. I mean, like he's one I think is a couple low. I mean, I didn't like the Wine Steward. I don't like Protective. Like I said, I mean, I like Antiquarian a little bit, but really that Peter Pan, I'm not too high. And I mean, I'm essentially going to be fading the 3 of them, using Antiquarian just a little bit. But yeah, I don't see it with Protective.
The 8-horse Honor Marie, 12-1, finished 8th in the Derby, did not race in the Preakness. So as Sarah mentioned a little bit earlier, pay attention to some of these horses coming in a little bit more fresh, rested. This is only a $40,000 horse, comes in from a small barn, will be, I'm sure a big story on NBC leading into the big race. Ran well at the Louisiana Derby, but will, from what I understand, need a lot of speed here in order. So would you classify him more as a closing horse, Sarah?
I would say so. I don't think he's quite the deep closer that Sierra Leone is to his outside. I don't really see him in last early on, but he's going to be near the back of the pack, which might be okay because we've talked about how we think there's going to be a lot of horses that want that forward position in this race, and that might help set things up for him. This is my Kentucky Derby trip horse that I'm betting back at the right price. He was working so well going into the Kentucky Derby, really the buzz of the morning glories that there were. A lot of people had eyes on him and thought that he was really training very impressively coming into that race. And he's another one that at the start of that race just completely eliminated. His day was done. He got bumped around. He didn't really get into any sort of comfortable position early on. And now he's coming into this race where there's a lot less horses, a lot less traffic, and a lot less trying to get out of the gate from those riders around him. And if he can get a little bit of a cleaner trip, save some ground, get himself into a better position than he was in the Kentucky Derby, which a better position than that should not be too difficult. I want to give him another opportunity because he ran so well to finish second to Catching Freedom.
Yeah, I respect Honor Marie. I was very high on Honor Marie in the Derby as well. I think at the end of the day, like where I kind of just had to say no on Honor Marie is that, I think the best closer in the race is Sierra Leone, and I'm hoping for a scenario in which Dornoch gets loose, and I'm hoping the pace isn't as crazy. And so, I think if there's any horse that's going to close and make a late impact, I think it's going to be Sierra Leone. So yeah, and I mean, watching replays of Anna Marie, that there have been a couple instances where you see the big move, so you're like, oh wow, this horse, like, more distance the better. I do think that a mile and a quarter might be pushing it a touch with this horse, but I don't know. That's just a visual impression, sort of takeaway that I've had watching some of his races.
And so let's talk about the 9 horse, Sierra Leone. Again, many people we've been talking about feel that this is the best horse in the race. Chad Brown trained, lost the Kentucky Derby by just a nose, skipped the Preakness, so is fresh coming in. Two things I think it's important we talk about here. Number one, having Pratt on his back. Number one, changing the jockey, and number two, the cage bit mouthpiece, and how you think that might help him as well. Sarah, your thoughts?
I think these changes are warranted given the way that we've seen him run the last part of his races overall, because he does have that tendency to lug in and not really be able to keep a straight course and keep that momentum going forwards in the way that would likely be best for him to be able to get himself to the winner's circle. And there's an argument that maybe he could be that horse that is undefeated if this equipment was experimented with a little bit sooner, or some of those problems were corrected. But it seems as though he's been more receptive to the cage bit now than he had been in the past. It seems like this is something that they had tried a while ago and he didn't really like it, didn't respond well to it. So they went back to the way that things were going with him, because clearly the talent is there. If it's not too broke, don't fix it. But now apparently he's been a lot more receptive. It's been a lot more effective for him. And I understand the rider change in terms of, okay, maybe Tyler Gaffalione couldn't get to his left-handed crop as soon as possible, or he was lugging in significantly on Forever Young, the Japanese contingent that was in the Kentucky Derby. But when you think about what riders ride more frequently for Chad Brown, Flavien Prat is, I think, a call ahead of Tyler Gaffalione. Not that they're not both talented, both capable, both certainly riders that ride very often for this trainer, but it's usually an Ortiz brother, Flavien Prat, and then you see Tyler Gaffalione, and then you see Manny Franco, and then you see Eric Cancel for this trainer. So it's just kind of a hierarchy, and if you can get Flavien Prat, you're going to get Flavien Prat.
Yeah, that's a good point. And those insights are like invaluable too, right? I mean, it's like an interesting thing. Like if you don't follow this every day, you wouldn't know this, but you do. So like that's a really good like kind of going through. Yeah, a little too much going through the roster though, right? Like in the pecking order. And I'm with you. I think Pratt. And I love Tyler. Like I really do. I love him personally, and I love him as a rider. I think Pratt, has time and time again in big races. Looking at stats for the Derby this year, where, I think it's like 6 consecutive Derbies now that he's ridden in. I think he's finished off the board once. You know, you're talking 19, 20 horse fields. The guy always puts his horses in the best possible position, always gets the most out of his horses, and he's a big race rider. I think it's an upgrade, and I think this horse is the best horse in the field. And I think that all things being equal, especially if the pace is hot, if it plays out as Sarah is projecting with the pace being hot, I think he wins this race easily. But if my boy Dornoch can slow things down a little bit, you never know. Maybe he hangs on.
Last but not least, let's talk about Mind Frame. This is a horse that I'm really interested in. This is the third Todd Pletcher horse, won convincingly at Gulfstream by 13 plus lengths. A freak of a horse, $600,000. Hopefully it buys you a freak. So Sarah, curious to get your thoughts on Mind Frame.
Look, I think looking at his first two races, seeing that visually impressive type of victory in both of them, as well as some pretty gaudy numbers for two of your first starts to go along with it, it's obviously extremely attractive to be looking at a horse where you think the sky's the limit and you want it to be that sort of generational talent that we're all hoping to see once in a lifetime or maybe twice if we're lucky. But this is a lot of new stuff being thrown his way. And that's where I have to look at, okay, do I think this horse is worth the price that they're going to be? And because it's Todd Pletcher and Mike Rapoli and Ira Jr., the answer for me is no, because he's not getting a similar lead like he got in his last start at Churchill Downs, where he was able to set a pretty comfortable pace. That is not happening in this race. We've talked about Dornoch going. We've talked about Seize the Gray. We've talked about the Wine Sword. Where is Mind Frame going to be? At least he's all the way towards the outside, but he's not going to have an easy time of it on the lead with some horses to his inside that I think are a little bit quicker than him. And I don't think Ira Ortiz Jr. is going to be on that all-out send with him. And again, sort of like I mentioned with Protective, Fierceness, Mike Rapoli's Kentucky Derby favorite, he's not here. So was the decision to send Mind Frame here because they want someone in the Belmont Stakes that they think could make some noise and possibly hit the board? They want to really see what he's made of, have that class test, see if he's really able to compete in some of these top echelon 3-year-old races. It is the time to find out, but at the same time, it's not the time for me to find out at any price less than 5 to 1.
So I was at the Pletcher barn a little bit this morning, and I hope I'm okay to say this. I was talking to some folks there who work with the horses closely, and it's pretty. I mean, I think they'd probably say this if you asked them. They didn't think this horse was going to be, I mean, obviously you see the price tag on him, like they knew he was good, but I don't think they knew he was what they've seen from him these first two races. Like they didn't think he was going to be this sort of breakout, win by 15 lengths on debut, then win by 7 lengths, next race, first level allowance. So I think they've been a little surprised by how quickly he has shown this sort of dominance. But I'm with Sarah on this one 100%. For the price, I feel like it is too much too soon, especially if you're looking for this horse to break through and win. We just don't see it often. I mean, you occasionally see it, but you don't see it often in a spot like this where you have a horse go from maiden win to first level allowance to boom, Belmont Stakes winner. I mean, you could win other stakes, the Belmont Stakes. And I don't know, maybe the fact that it's a mile and a quarter is a little different this year. But look, I'd be surprised if Mind Frame didn't run a good race. I think very good chance he hits the board. I don't think he's going to win this race. So I'm going to say no, at least for betting him on top.
All right, so we've did a deep dive into all 10 of these horses. Sarah, I know you got a dog waiting for you in the house, wants to get pet, wants to get fed, wants probably to go to the bathroom. With that being said, before we let you go, I like to phrase it this way: take us to the window, hold our hand. How are you playing the Belmont Stakes on Saturday evening?
Likely a win bet on Honor Marie. And then I'm hoping that the My Race Horse connections show up in full force, go to the windows, go to their ADW, go to whatever it is that they're betting with, and hammer Seize the Gray. And if Sierra Leone floats up to 9 to 5, 2 to 1, higher than that, that is a straight exacta that I will be playing and a little box saver underneath, because I do think he's the best horse in the race. And some of the other horses might give you a better price on him because they'll take money that perhaps is a little bit of fan money.
So you're loving the 8. and you're gonna get creative and be a little exotic with the 1 and the 9.
Or you're leaving the 1 out entirely?
Leaving the
or-
1 out. Yeah, I'm
Got
hoping
it.
that he takes a lot of money and that
Oh,
Sierra
I'm
Leone price
sorry.
gets better.
Sorry.
So,
So
8, 9, 9, 8.
8, 9, 9, 8. That's how you're playing it. Fantastic. Sarah, thank you so much for spending, just priceless time with us this evening, really breaking it down. Your knowledge is so appreciative. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thanks for having me, and good luck this weekend.
You got
Thanks,
it.
Sarah.
You got it. Dan, before we sign off, I know ABR, you guys did a deep dive into Seize the Gray's jockey, right? I'd like to take a look at that before we close up this bad boy.
Yeah, Jaime Torres, 25 years old, only started riding a couple of years ago. He gets this mount on Seize the Gray. Really interesting stories, a little bit of his background, how excited he is to be racing this weekend.
Winning the Preakness has been the best emotion in my life. I mean, I feel very blessed to have the opportunity.
The Gray wins the Preakness.
Manjo Cordero, he's like part of my family. He dedicated part of his time, to teach me and take me for the ride. Riding for my racehorse is crazy. I love it. Everybody has been very thankful, congratulating, and they really love it. They really live this. Seize the Gray is doing great. I have been watching him galloping and jogging and everything. He looks very happy. I have a lot of energy. Riding the Belmont is very excited for me, especially going back to Saratoga, where my horse won his first race. And I want to congratulate all the team, and I'm very thankful for them. I give them all the credit.
Great stuff as always, Dan, you and everybody there at America's Best Racing. You guys do a phenomenal job. So impressed, and I feel blessed that I get to work with you each and every year. With that being said, we heard how Sarah's going to play it. You take us to the window. How are you playing the Belmont Stakes on Saturday?
So you can scale this any way you want, but I'm going to give you as sort of a template a $100 bet. Let's say you're betting with $100. The way I would do it would be a $40 straight exacta, 6 with 9. So that's Dornoch over Sierra Leone. A $20 exacta, 9 with 6. So that's Sierra Leone over Dornoch. And then a $20 win place bet on number 6, Dornoch, who I expect will be all of 15 to 1. So I've got my win place money on Dornoch, and then I've got exactas weighing the Dornoch over Sierra Leone exacta a little heavier. And I think if that comes out, I think it's going to be a really good day, because I think, the horse that I like, you like to be on horses who are going to be bigger prices. So that's where I'm at.
I'm going to play an exacta box with Sierra Leone, the 9. I'm really intrigued with Mind Frame. I'm going to throw Mind Frame in that. And I'm going to play the 2. I know you're fading the 2, Resilient, but again, like I just, uber impressed, even though, again, finished 6th at the Derby, but the ground that horse ran to make up for not the best start coming out of the 18 post, since this horse has been riding with blinkers, has just looked really, really impressive, winning the Wood Memorial. So I'm throwing in the 2 with some good odds as well, hoping that at post time it'll still be 10 to 1, possibly 8 to 1, if that. That's how I'm playing it. Again, why don't you let the folks know what they can get by using the NYRA Bets promo code? Yeah,
you just go to NYRABets.com, use promo code ABR25, and that gets you a $25 free play plus a $200 deposit match for new members. Basically, you put in $200, you'll get $200 back, plus you get that $25 free play on NYRABets.com. Use promo code ABR25. I do want to say, by the way, Resilience, I'm not fading him. Like, I think he has no shot. I think he's a really cool horse. I think he's going to get a great ride. He's going to be on the inside. He's going to save ground. See, now I want back in on Resilience. I'm like you're onto something. I like Resilience. I think he's a cut below, but I like him.
Okay. All right. Well, maybe you'll play my exacta box.
I might. I just might.
Just maybe, just maybe. I want to thank Sarah. I want to thank Kenny Mayne for joining us as well. If you see him walking around Saratoga, let him know you watched this this Belmont Stakes preview and what a great job he did. I know we've got some NBA finals action starting tonight because the show airs on Thursday, but you might be watching on Friday. Hopefully, certainly you're watching on Saturday as well, getting you ready for the race. Series-wise, I like the Dallas Mavericks. I think they win in 7. My favorite series bet is that you can get the Dallas Mavericks plus 1.5 games at minus 110. That is how I'm playing it. Game 1 tonight, if you're going to be wagering it, I do like Dallas winning. I'll play them on the money line. And yes, please give me the 6.5 as well. I will take it. I also like Luka over 28.5 total points tonight. And I like Derek White over 2.5 3-pointers. Dan, any final thoughts before we say hasta la vista and we blow this popsicle stand?
You gave us a same game parlay too that we could build off of that. I love it. I love the Dallas pick. I will say, for the sake of my good friend Sean Patrick Nolan, who you might have guessed bleeds green, hoping his Celtics come through for him. Yes, he's had championships in recent history. He's had plenty of joy as a Boston fan, period. But I like to see Sean happy. So I'm slightly rooting for the Celtics. But I do like betting Dallas tonight. I'm going to tail you and Kenny, and I think just bet Dallas on the money line tonight. So I appreciate that tip. And other than that, go door knock. I feel like we could make a good bit of money on Saturday. Go door knock.
You love door knock. Man, horse crush for sure. Everybody, thank you so much for tuning in to our Belmont Stakes preview show. Again, brought to you by NYRA Bets. And good luck at the track on Saturday.
It's America's original sport, and no one covers it better than americasbestracing.net. From the sport to the lifestyle, the best races, horses, and destination venues, cocktails, gambling, fashion, and more. americasbestracing.net is a sport for you.